$2.5 billion, $718 million for small businesses here in Alberta alone, that these small businesses were told that they were going to get these dollars back. And instead, the federal government has been hanging on to them for over 2 years.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News. Justin Trudeau's federal Liberals environmental policies, including plastic bans and possible net zero legislation, and even efforts to prevent Canadians from buying gas-powered vehicles, have not sat well with Canadians, and they've not sat particularly well with Albertans. Even Alberta's government has been bashing heads unapologetically with the feds over some of their policies.
But today's announced de facto production cap on Alberta's oil and gas sector amounts to an intentional attack by the federal government on the economy of Alberta and the financial well-being of millions of Albertans and Canadians. Alberta owns our resources, and under the Constitution, we have the exclusive jurisdiction to develop them and to manage them.
Since our last chat with Alberta's Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, Rebecca Schulz, a great deal has happened on the federal stage in relation to some of these environmental policies, including Justin Trudeau deciding that he would hold on to $2.5 billion earmarked for small businesses in the form of a carbon tax rebate, in addition to Minister Stephen Guilbeault insisting on continuing to push his plastics ban, his federal plastics ban, despite a federal court deciding and ruling that that plastics ban was not only unconstitutional, but also unreasonable. So we thought it was time for us to sit down once again with Minister Schulz for an update. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. The Liberal government in Canada would love to have people believe that they're getting more out of the carbon tax than it is going into it. Sadly, some people do believe that. I think for most people, they can do the math pretty quickly. But I wanted to talk more specifically about this shocking Canada carbon tax rebate for small businesses. Effectively $2.5 billion that was supposed to go back to small businesses. I think it amounted to like $4,000 for every single business. And Trudeau has just decided to keep that. Now, when you keep something that's owed to people, there's a word for that and where I come from. But what's going on here? This just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely shocking for people because we've talked a lot about the consumer carbon tax. And obviously, the parliamentary budget officer has said, look, you know, people are not getting more back than what they are contributing. Like, they've poked holes, obviously, in Prime Minister Trudeau's argument when it comes to that. And I think most people recognize that the carbon tax is really just making every aspect of everyday life more and more expensive. Right. Now, when it comes to small businesses, this is the area that hasn't really been talked about as much. And it's $2.5 billion, $718 million for small businesses here in Alberta alone, that these small businesses were told that they were going to get these dollars back. And instead, the federal government has been hanging on to them for over 2 years. Now, you know, they're saying in the budget that, you know, they're going to get some of that money back. I mean, that remains to be seen. I mean, at this point, they've been hanging on to it so long, and that makes a huge impact for small businesses who really have struggled under this inflationary crisis. Carbon tax being one of those things is just driving up the costs for small businesses. And there are job creators. Yeah. They are the heart of the economic engine of Canada, and it is just so hard to see them struggling, and then to watch the federal Liberal government just hang on to those dollars and not roll them back out as that was intended to do.
In addition to that, though, and it's policies like the carbon tax, but also this plastics ban, in that video you said that their bagging costs for a food bank that's trying to help people went from $3,000 a year to $70,000. Is that right?
Yeah, so the costs actually haven't escalated to that point, but that's what it would cost. Yeah. So because of the plastics ban, and I asked, you know, can you use the compostable bags like Co-op, right? Yeah. Because I've talked a lot about how Leaf Environmental Products stepped up to come up with this solution for the Calgary Co-op. Yeah. The bags are not plastic. They are 100% compostable. They act like a plastic bag. They also help encourage composting, because instead of just having the compost materials in your compost bucket, now you have bags that break down, can hold that, keep it less messy, and I think that encourages more people to compost as well. They cannot use those either, and so yes, with no other changes, their cost for bags would go from $3,000 to $70,000 in a year. And you know, when you think about that, when she put it in perspective, and I saw this when we were touring the food bank,
reusable bags cost significantly more per unit than a plastic bag or even than a compostable bag.
Yeah.
And so for us, if we have to then channel our resources to the purchase of reusable bags, that is money we are not spending on food.
Seeing people come in with suitcases.
Yeah, because they're going to get on the bus with 10 days worth of food. And how else would you do that? And like sometimes you see people and like they have like a baby in a stroller and a toddler and a suitcase.
Yeah.
And how would you ever get that home?
Seeing people show up with suitcases because they have no way to carry bags. I mean, the food bank is being creative about that. They're reaching out to ask if they can reuse bags. But I mean, you can't reuse necessarily a bag that's had chicken in it, for example. They have to make sure that the bags are clean, that they're able to reuse them, getting some of those donations from the community as well. So they're looking at ways that they can creatively mitigate those costs essentially. But then, yes, for the carbon tax, that was only on one building.
Yeah.
One energy bill for one building, not counting their other buildings and not counting fuel, as you said, $3,800 a month.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. And so that's $3,800 a month. That's not going to support healthy, nutritious food for families who are struggling right now under the cost of living here in Canada.
Stephen Guilbeault continues, despite the federal court ruling that this plastics ban is unconstitutional, to push this. Has there been any developments on that front? And how come he has an utter disregard for the rule of law and the federal court ruling?
Oh, it's wild. And not only did they say it's unconstitutional, it's also unreasonable. Yeah. And when I raised those items with Minister Guilbeault and said, look, I mean, this is not the first time. We saw it on Bill C-69 as well. Yeah. I think that their opinion is that these are opinions of the highest courts in our country, and not really viewing them seriously as decisions about our Constitution and what things should and ought to be looking like here in Canada. So, we, of course, were an intervener in that first case. They are looking to appeal. They're appealing that. And we will continue to fight them in court over this because it is absolute nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. It is unreasonable and unconstitutional. And like I said, it's having the exact opposite impact on what we're really trying to do here.
You can call me an extremist, but I like getting my food handed to me in a bag at the drive-thru without having to ask for it. I like having the option of being able to purchase a drink and drink out of a water bottle. I like being able to fuel my car. Heck, I even like being able to heat my home in winter so that I don't freeze to death. If you like any of those things and you don't want woke politicians taking them away, consider signing our petition at nogreenreset.com.